Hello and welcome to sort of a viewer quick edit. Today I've got this photo from Maciej and I'm gonna try to edit it in Lightroom. I think this is a very interesting perspective and definitely very interesting foreground. Now, because these lights are so bright down here, you probably should use Photoshop with different layers to really get the best out of it, but if you just have Lightroom, I'm still gonna try to edit this as good as I can. So let's start with the global adjustments and the highlights. Now, because we have such a bright foreground, I'm not quite sure should I actually go a little bit further with it and really amplify that overall look. Maybe it actually works. So let's try to bring up the whites and highlight slider first of all. I'm definitely gonna add quite a bit of contrast here to really pronounce the color and really pronounce the stars and the blacks, maybe even bring down the blacks a little bit. Now, even though I think the foreground is very interesting, I think I'm just gonna crop it a little bit to get a little bit more of the stars and make this, down there a little bit less distracting. Then let's also add a bit of clarity. Vibrance is definitely fine. Color temperature is also fine. Tonal curve, I'm not quite sure how far I can adjust these sliders because otherwise I would just completely blow this foreground, so I don't really want to go too far with it. Just gonna play around with these sliders and maybe just adjust some of them a little bit. So I think overall, for the global adjustments, I really can't do too much here because once again, the contrast from the bright foreground and the very dark night sky is so heavy. But I am going to try and go down to the vignetting and this time go into the plus vignetting, and the reason I'm doing that is not to get any sort of effect but just to get rid of this very heavy minus vignetting in the corners. I really don't like plus vignetting, but in this case it really just fixes the image and doesn't really add any ugly look to it. So then let's go to the local adjustments, and I think the only thing I'm gonna do here, at least for now, is just grab a graduated filter and drag it kind of over the sky and go even further into the plus contrast, maybe even add more clarity and add also some noise reduction since I have done so many adjustments, especially contrast and clarity. I kinda like the mixture between the very dark top, going to medium exposure, going to very light exposure, but I still think that the very bottom is a little bit distracting, so let me just try to add some vignette down here, just with a lot of minus exposure and pretty much make this whole bottom part almost non-existent. So, do I want to change anything else? A thing that I've noticed is that she shot this with a Nikon D7000 at ISO 640, and you really don't get that many stars if you shoot at such a low ISO. Now, I understand that you probably didn't want to go higher because of the very bright foreground, and if you would have went higher, you would have just blown everything down here. But for example, this photo right here, I shot this at 6400 ISO with a Canon 600D, which is substantially worse in low light, and I end up here with still quite a lot of detail despite being at such a high ISO. So I think ideally you would want to shoot this with two separate exposures, one for the foreground and one for the stars, and then merge them together in Photoshop, or maybe even with the HDR tool here. But just in case you were scared of going higher with the ISO, it's really not something you have to be worried about. So let me think. I think the last thing I'm gonna do is just grab an adjustment brush and go into the minus contrast just for some parts of this roof. Now it won't have that big of a difference. Maybe I'm even gonna raise the shadows, just we have a little bit of texture down here on the roof. So I think this picture turned out pretty okay. I mean, the editing isn't as drastic as in some of my other pictures, but here is the before and here is the after, just a little bit more pronounced and definitely way more in your face. So I hope you at least could take away 1 or 2 techniques from that tutorial. Once again, it's definitely a very interesting idea and concept of having such big foreground objects with such a bright exposure compared to the very dark night sky, but I think it worked out pretty well. So thank you once again very much for submitting your photo, and thank you all for watching this video. I'm gonna be back tomorrow with a little bit of a longer edit, so stay tuned for that. Have a great day, and of course, take care.